Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're presenting, well, I'm still in Moore Park, but we're presenting live from the Fennelly farm in Tinnick, just outside of Port Arlington. And the Fennellys are participants in the Teagasc Connect Future Farms programme, working at a socially safe distance with Richie O'Brien. And today the lads have taken over the Teagasc Instagram and Twitter pages, as well as being involved with us in the webinar today, and we're looking forward to interacting with them, and we're hoping that you'll interact with them on the social media platforms and during the course of the webinar as well for the next 45 or 50 minutes. So just before I hand over to Richie, I'd like to thank Tom, David and his family and their family for so willingly engaging with Richie and myself in order to deliver this today, and we hope that you'll enjoy what is a slightly different experience in terms of a farm walk. So I'll hand over to you now, Richie, okay?
Okay, Stuart, thanks for that. And it's great to be out here in Laois, Tinnick, County Laois, and to thank the lads for taking on this virtual farm walk. Today, as you said, we're on the webinar this morning, and we will be, the lads are taking over Teagasc Twitter and Instagram account later on, so you can follow what's happening on the farm. So straight away, Stuart is going to put up a map of the farm, and I'm going to ask the lads maybe to comment. Tom, maybe you might comment on the land here and many hectares available here at the minute. Just the background of the farm.
Yes, Richie. We've 106 hectares here on the farm, and we're grazing 206 cows at the moment, and carrying the followers as well. We have 74 heifers and 82 following calves. So farm here is a dry farm at the moment, very dry on account of the drought. But the good thing about it is it's all around the yard, it's all in one block.
Okay, and maybe I was here 2 weeks ago, lads, and the cover was starting to fall at that stage. And maybe just comment on that, David, just the cover 2 weeks ago and the cover starting to fall, and what actions you took then and what actions you're taking now.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Richie.
So we're looking here at a picture of the wedge on the 3rd of May. So things were looking healthy enough at that point. Growth was still pretty good, but since then the growth has fallen off dramatically and the ground has dried up fierce. So at that point, we kind of knew we were facing this drought scenario. The soil moisture deficit in the area has risen now to nearly 80. So we decided to continue to graze a little bit further than the cover of 500 and utilise the quality grass that was left on the platform. We extended the rotation, grazing a couple of strong paddocks by pre-mowing. And 2 weeks ago, Richie visited us here, and at that time we decided we'd start supplementing a bit stronger with bale silage. So we're allocating about the equivalent of 1 day and a 24-day rotation of the platform, so about 2.7 or 2.9 hectares a day. We're feeding, it generally equates then to 5 kilos of meal in the parlour, 5 kilos of silage, and then the remainder of the diet is in grazed grass. So currently now the farm cover is down at 302, cover for a cow of 105, and the growth rate is at 23. So we're looking for rain anywhere we can get it.
And you've matched growth and demand.
Yeah, so the growth is back, as I said, to 23, and demand is at 20 now. So we've removed the heifers and calves from the platform, and we'll see them a little bit later on.
Okay, so Richie,
Yeah, just looking at the covers here of grass that's available here on the farm at the minute. If I can just, you see this here, and you see where the lads' boots are here. Maybe David, go out. Just kind of, as you can see, the grass, the level of grass here, there's about 800 of pre-grazing cover. That's what's here, and this is typical of a lot of farms that are under stress at the minute. Like there's trauneens, I call them, gone very stemmy. I suppose it's natural that the plant at this stage of the year is going. That's what the plant tells itself, and the stress of the drought has encouraged that more. That's type of cover that the cows are going into. Okay, as you can see over there, David made the point that they're feeding silage at the minute, and I'm going to pass to David maybe to comment on how they're doing that. They've taken two options. They fed along the wire and they fed in the field, and they also use soya hulls for a stage as well. So maybe David, you might comment on the different feeding options and how you do it.
Okay, thanks, Richie. Yeah, so we're feeding, as you said, about 6 kilos of silage at the moment, and we started off feeding by the wire, mixed with 3 kilos of soya hulls and 2 kilos of meal in the parlour at the time. So we found there was a little bit of wastage of the soya hulls. They didn't mix quite that well in the diet feeder with bale silage, so we have decided to just increase the meal in the parlour and feed only silage in the paddock. So at the moment, we're actually just feeding it at random, we'll say, across the paddock, rather than at the wire, and they're cleaning it up very well now, I must say. So there's very little damage, and probably the thing that we'd be maybe a little bit concerned about would be when we do get rain and we're still feeding silage, that you could be inclined to damage the paddock at that stage. So we'll just monitor it as we go, and if we have to revert to the shed at that point, we can do so also. So we have a few options, but I suppose just being willing to try different things is effective at the moment.
So have you actually gotten any rain, David, yet?
So not a huge amount really. We didn't get much all along. Say, look, from that healthy looking wedge on the 3rd of May. We haven't had much rain since then, Stuart. So we had a nice shower now last night, and the weather is looking a bit more broken for the next few days. So we're hoping for it.
Okay.
Okay, will you just clarify that there, Richie, because we just lost you briefly there. So the fertilizer.
Okay, so basically they missed around the nitrogen and they felt the place was too dry. So basically they were heading 2 weeks ago. This farm was heading towards a brown drought scenario. As you can see from the grassland behind me here, there is a slight greenness. That small bit of rain, couple of mils of rain, has basically helped the scenario here. But it's still very, very slow growth. But they felt last week the rain was coming, the forecast was good, so they went with 27 units of protected urea last week across the farm.
Okay. Okay, and
Okay.
just Richie,
do
you want to comment on we'll say across the territory that you're covering with the future farms on the program? There's a big variation actually. I see Jack Kearney down near us here in Moorpark is doing okay.
Yeah, and I'd say up to last week, Waterford wasn't too bad, but they seemed to, in the last week, Waterford seems to have caught up with us. Like the growth was back down to 50s, Wexford 50. So the average for the Monitor Farm program was 40. If you take Jack Kearney out, it would be under 40. So in Cork, so it's right across. I was looking at a discussion group, Pat Moylan's discussion group there, North Kilkenny. They were getting growths of 20 as well. So it's typical. I would say the low growths is typical Meath, Kildare, Kilkenny, Laois. That's the typical growth around this area. So it has been affected by the drought a lot earlier than other parts of the country.
Okay.
And looking at the reports from other parts, that high feeding rate seems to be that kind of 666 feeding rate seems to be very common right through. Okay, Stuart, what we're going to do, and you might come in with George and John, then we're going to move to the next stop.
Okay.
Just on the second cut silage ground, okay?
Okay, so
okay?
I'll bring John in here so at this stage. Okay, so John, thanks for coming back to us this week, having been on with us with John Trent and Michael Carroll a couple of weeks ago. So if you just, I suppose, there's two aspects that I want you to have a look at really, John, today, or to talk about today, is probably, we have two scenarios. We have people that are heading into a drought scenario, kind of just on the cusp of it, and then there's people like the Fennellys and those around North Kilkenny, Carlow, that are really in the midst of it and trying to come out of it, hoping to come out of it with the rain that's forecast for the weekend. Now, I suppose Richie was saying, how much is, if Elodie's figures are correct, and Met Éireann's figures are correct, and we get an inch or a bit with it of rain over the next couple of days, what impact is that going to have on the soil moisture deficit in Fennelly's at 80?
All right, Stuart. Okay, so we know that the average growth is about 50 for last week across the country. Richie's touched on where it is in the Leinster area. It's averaging about 40, 45, and then in the pocket that Richie picked out, Laois there into Meath, you know, we're probably into the lower levels of maybe 20s and 30s. We also know if your farm covers below 500 that you're going to have lower growth as well, irrespective of where you are in the country. Despite the difficulties last week, when we look at the pasture-based figures that Micheál and O'Leary and Fergus Bogue put together, is that the average growth is around 50, but the demand was also 50. So people have already acted, and that was great to see that people are trying to match growth and demand. And irrespective of where you are, that's the first principle, to match growth and demand. So if you're only growing 50, you have to have a demand of 50 just to hold the farm cover where you are. Now we know nationally the farm cover is above 600, which is great to see. 500 is a very, very important figure in grass supply and farm cover measurements. Irrespective of spring, summer, or autumn, once you go below 500, growth rate is compromised, irrespective of whether you're in drought conditions or not. So that's a big benchmark to keep an eye on. So matching growth and demand, keeping the farm cover close to 600 and certainly above 500. And then I suppose the rotation length, given the growth rates at the moment, we probably need to be closer to the mid-20s rather than 20 days. They're the quick guides. I would expect then, Stuart, given the forecast of rain, so we'll hope for the best, plan for the worst. It's probably the motto that I'll give you. But if we get a forecast of rain and the Fennellys get, 25 millimetres, their soil moisture deficit, I gather, somewhere around 75 or 80 millimetres, that brings them back close to 50 millimetres of soil moisture deficit. So, the Fennellys are currently growing 20. Yeah. If they got an inch of rain, growing 20 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day, thereabouts. If we got an inch of rain, that would bring about 25 to 30 millimeters of moisture back into the ground, which would hopefully then reduce the soil moisture deficit from, 70, 75 or 80 back closer to 50. That should lead to an increase in growth rate. And if we could get the growth rate up to about 40 for a period of 10 days, that means, we'd have 20 by 10 days, an extra 20 of kgs of growth above demand for 10 days, which will bring the farm cover then from 300 to 500. 10 days by extra 20 kilograms of growth will bring the farm cover back up to 500. And that would, to 5, now upstream millimeters, they may not get the growth of 40 to shift farm cover, but if the higher we can get the farm cover, the greater the growth potential of the farm. They have acted very, very well by holding growth and demand together, by doing all the strategies of, bringing in meal, bringing in silage, taking the heifers off the platform effectively into a non-grass diet, and bringing in an extra grazing ground that was deemed for second cut silage. So the reaction has been good. Now we just need to try and get the growth up.
Okay, so and just to clarify, because of the signal again, John, so 0 to minus 25 in terms of soil moisture deficit won't impact on growth. 25 to 50 is beginning to impact on growth, but it's only when you go into the 50 plus scenario that we're beginning to see extremely significant.
Once we go beyond 50 millimeters of soil moisture deficit, growth is severely compromised, and once we get into 75 and 80 millimeters soil moisture deficit, we are in restricted growth.
Okay. Right. So just quickly on the fertilizer side of things then, John.
So I think the lads have done a good job in terms of applying fertilizer now. The fertilizer's out before the forecasted levels of rain will come. So if the rain will come of the order of magnitude that we expect, as I said, we hope for the best, plan for the worst. But if we got 25 millimeters, that would bring an injection of moisture into soil. It would bring the fertilizer into soil. It would make the roots more active, make the plant grow a bit better. And they have the fertilizer out, as they outlined. So for a while, I wouldn't be advocating applying fertilizer today or anything, to have it out and try and capitalize on that fertilizer. Then, Stuart, in all this, you've got to keep walking the farm. You've got to read the signals of the farm in terms of grass growth. And, if growth comes and things improve, then we let the fertilizer work. And if things keep moving forward and we get growth rates of 40s or 30s or 50s, then we can look at reapplying fertilizer again and capitalize on that. I will say two things, Stuart. Grass has gone through a period of stress. There will be a level of stemming, as Richie's touched on it. When grass gets stressed, stem will come. That decision is already made, whether the rain comes or not, just to be clear about that. So even though grass growth will improve from moisture coming from rainfall sources, we are still going to have a level of stemming, whether we like it or not. I just see a question on the screen, Stuart, where do we get soil moisture deficits?
Yeah.
All we can do here is have a regional picture of soil moisture deficits from Met Éireann, and it's an important question to ask because there's lots of variation within the farm and there's lots of variation within the, certain localities, to be honest, right? So sometimes I see some moisture deficits of 40 or 50 millimeters for farms where I know heavy soils and they don't have that level of soil moisture deficit. In fact, the growth is normal. So on the farm in terms of growth on the farm.
Okay, so
you'll have on the farm, you'll have fields that are exposed to wind and to drought and sunshine, and fields that are heavier and less exposed. So you'd have to, walking the farm will tell you that, and doing the farm cover.
So just before I go back to Richie, John, then there's a question in from Barry O'Sullivan. With the rain, would you be concerned that too much nitrogen will come up in the grass, basically? And just before you answer, I'll just ask people to send the questions in via the Q&A rather than trying to come in to speak, if that's okay. So just, would you be concerned about a rise in nitrogen in grass when rain does come?
Okay, I'll answer this question this is a common question now, Stuart, so it's good it's asked, right? Yeah. It is. So you can't have butter on both sides of your bread here, right? When rainfall comes, right, nature takes over, and the bugs may have shut down because of drought. Moisture comes into the soil. Bugs release in the soil will release nitrogen, right? We have nitrogen from sources of dung and urine. We have nitrogen released from the soil. Nitrogen released in the soil is going to be highest during the summer months when bugs get going. We have fertilizer left over. So there's going to be a surge in nitrogen, due to nature alone, right? And this always happens after drought or a period of growth within a drought, right? That nitrogen gets released because of change in rainfall, change in scenario of the physical capabilities of the soil in terms of releasing nitrogen. So that's going to happen. We know after a prolonged period of drought that the regrowth is often not as palatable to cows because the cows are grazing very dry, very sweet grass, and now we go to a lower dry matter grass with higher nitrogen because of nature in the soil. That's going to happen. But I'll be glad to have the feed and do, get on and deal with the palatability issues. They're not going to be perfect. The more rainfall we get, the more release of nitrogen from the soil. That's going to happen. It comes from numerous sources, as I said, the soil, the dung, the urine, the fertilizer. That's going to happen. I'll be glad to have the feed. It may be not the most palatable in the world at times, but isn't it great that we have grass rather than feeding high-cost feeds of meal or silage, and we'll take it.
The other thing that it emphasises, John, maybe is the fertilizer strategy going into that drought scenario too. That it is prudent to cut back when the growth is dropping off because there'll be a lot of mineralization will take place.
It will, yeah. In the Grass 10 newsletter, we issued kind of guidelines on nitrogen. So for those who are growing normal, can stick to the normal rates of maybe a unit a day per day in the rotation. Obviously, we'll have that where growth is kind of restricted in the kind of 30s, 40s, 20s scenario. And when we get less than 20, obviously, then our where there's little or no growth, we'll hold back in the fertilizer. No denying that. But that was covered well in the Grass 10 newsletter by Fergus and ourselves in the Grass 10 team during the week, and I just refer people to that.
Okay, perfect.
And you're going to have variation within the farm as well, Stuart. You know that.
Of course, yeah. Okay, John. So I'll stop you there and go back to Richie. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Richie, we're back with you there now. You're after moving on to.
Okay.
We just point out, I suppose, that the lads are the sustainability farm for the Glanbia program as well, and kind of farming for the future is part of the title. So you're looking at some future farming practices, or something that's becoming a bit more common on farm now in the last number of years. So I'll hand over to you again to talk us through that aspect.
Yeah, there's two reasons why we stopped in the field here. Basically, this is silage ground that was cut the 15th of May. Now this is back into the grazing scenario. So basically, this should have been closed for second cut silage, and now it's been used for grazing as part. So the overall stocking rate has been reduced to 2.88 by bringing in that ground. I suppose that as part of the program, we have been looking at, using protected urea. So all the farms across the Teagasc Columbia joint program using protected urea right through the summer months, and the trailing shoe, the practice of using trailing shoes. So the field in front of me, I'm hoping that you can get it. I'm going to get the lads. Maybe I'm going to leave my picture on there, and the lads will explain. David maybe might explain what's happening. Do you see the difference in colour there, Stuart?
Yeah, very clearly, Richie. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was cut the 15th of May. So maybe David, you might comment on what's happened this season.
Yeah. So cut around the 15th of May, Richie. Probably about just to comment on the first cut, silage probably back 20% in overall yield. So we followed out then with, I know the conditions were dry, but in hope of rain, we followed on with the slurry anyway, but only for the trail and shoe. It wasn't an option at all. So grass has recovered relatively well. This field was reseeded last year, and there's probably a cover of 600 on it, I suppose, at the moment. So the cows will be coming in here in maybe 4 or 5 days' time. So we'll be delighted to get a bit of quality back into the diet rather than what they're grazing at the moment. So you can see a little bit of a change in colour of grass there as well. So that's what that is. The headlands here got 2 loads of just happened to be watery slurry, more by accident than design. So you can see there definitely better uptake of nitrogen in that area of the field. So you can see that through Richie's camera there, which is just interesting, I suppose, at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's quite clear on Richie's video there the extra the impact of the extra nitrogen, I suppose. And I might just throw up the slide there, Richie, from what William had there for just the impact of the trailing shoe, just on slurry nitrogen values. Can you see that there now, Rich? So what this is just showing, I suppose, for everybody else on the call, the lads are quite are very tuned into this, obviously, from having the advantage of having the trailing shoe on the farm, but they're gaining nitrogen. You can see in the blue bars against the using splash plate, as well as there's obviously nitrogen lost to the air in a scenario like David has explained there. If you were to spread that on stubble ground after silage a couple of weeks ago in the weather that they've had, but the dribble bar was dropping the slurry closer to the ground where it could be made more use could be made of it, and they were gaining a couple of units of nitrogen, and that's where the line is coming from, is basically extra nitrogen showing itself through in the grass. So I suppose from a sustainability point of view, we have to be very conscious of the need to probably be careful with our nitrogen applications so that we minimize ammonia losses and also losses to groundwater, etc. And trailing shoe and dribble bars, and indeed injection, which isn't very popular in Ireland, but is an option, I suppose, and gives us a further increase in nitrogen per 1,000 gallons, can also be considered in terms of increasing nitrogen use efficiency. So do you want to make any comment on that, Richie, in terms of the programme and the focus on trying to improve nitrogen use efficiency across all the farms involved?
Yeah, so in the program we set a target that I suppose the nitrogen use efficiency basically is the amount of nitrogen brought into the farm and the amount of nitrogen that goes out of the farm, and that goes out as percentage. So Aoife Leader, who's a master student working with us on the program, she has done a bit of work on this, and for the farm here actually is quite good. So the national average is 24% nitrogen use efficiency, and Aoife found for that. So, and we're putting a bigger emphasis on that this year, that the first round of nitrogen, and maybe I get David to talk about the first round of nitrogen that he spread, that they used the trail and shoe to a large for the first round of nitrogen.
Yeah, so about the first round of nitrogen, we applied half bag of urea to 2/3 of the farm, and the other third of the farm then got trail and shoe, Richie. So then, following on from that, then a few weeks later, we alternated and spread the chemical nitrogen then on the ground that previously got slurry and vice versa. So I suppose there's just a little bit of saving there in terms of using the trail and shoe and the chemical nitrogen as well. So
and I suppose
getting better value out of slurry now that we do have that tool.
So, David, would you comment in terms of your perception of the growth following the on the ground that was given the slurry only? We'll say so. It was given the equivalent to 23 units, the same as what you do with fertilizer if you were applying it, but you put it on the form of slurry. Were you happy with the growth that you got from that?
Yeah, I'd say we'd definitely be happy enough with the growth. I suppose early in the year, just from the bit of traffic, naturally, if you get slurry, you know, there will be a little bit of reduced available grass, we'll say, but as regards to nitrogen from the slurry, you know, and you can see it here in this field today, like there's definitely no problem with it, and there's definitely a very good uptake from the trail and shoe. This is probably a good example of it here. You can definitely the more watery slurry.
Yeah, excellent. And how have you found the protected urea?
Protected urea has been fairly successful now. So this is our second full year using it as straight nitrogen. So there's also good products that are now available with a bit of K and sulfur added to it as well. So the next round we'll be going with now is 29 naught and 14 plus I think 3.5 units of sulfur. So that'll just keep things ticking along, and it'll be replaced with a K from silage offtake, and the farm is a little bit low in K in some areas as well. So there's a good range of products there now to go with protected urea as well. So it's no more difficult to use, and as regards the cost per unit of nitrogen, it shouldn't be more expensive. It should be more cost effective really rather than expensive.
Back to Tom there. So just go back to Tom there for a minute. Tom has looked at the soil fertility status of the farm. Tom, maybe comment on the overall soil fertility you were looking at there the other day, the overall soil fertility status.
Yes, Richie, it's something we've been looking at the last couple of years. We take an individual soil sample from every paddock every 2 years. And looking at the 2018 samples, only 26% of the farm were potash and lime. So over the 2 years, we've addressed both of those. And looking at the samples we took this year, we have 55 or 6% of the farm. So we continue now with that. Spreading urea and potash in the back end. Lime is fine for all the products at this stage.
Okay, so the percentage is over 55% of the farm. Okay, Stuart, we're going to move down another bit.
Okay.
Stuart?
Perfect. Yeah, that's okay.
We're only going to be 1 minute. We're just going down to the heifers. 1 minute, okay? And we'll be only 1 minute, okay?
Okay, perfect. That's grand. Okay, so it's just in the meantime while the lads are moving down there, I'm just going to I suppose back up a small bit of what they've said there in terms of the elements around protected urea and so forth as well. So we've shown the impact of the slurry nitrogen by using the low emission slurry spreading methods, and just going to quickly move to the protected urea aspect of it here just to show the reasoning for it. So especially if people haven't been used to using protected urea, I suppose the current weather probably wouldn't be conducive to the switch, I would imagine, in that you will probably be disappointed with the impact that you're going to get from it because of just the sheer lack of moisture at the moment. So if you haven't used it before, I wouldn't advocate switching right now. I prefer if people were to try switching when there's reasonable level of growth to give the fertilizer a chance, because more than likely people are going to believe that the fertilizer is at fault, even though it's the soil moisture issue is going to be at fault at the moment. But the rationale for the change from urea to protected urea is shown here on the screen, and the rationale is that in trials that we've conducted across a number of centres, you've surely heard this at this stage, but there's no impact in terms of grass yield. And you heard David speaking there about how they're quite happy with the response they've gotten to it in the last 12 to 18 months of use of it. So grass yield is good. David also mentioned the cost effectiveness of it, especially now at this time of the year. I suppose if we were talking, there are a number of farms, and Richie has all his farms in the Glanbia joint programme on protected urea on a full-time basis now. So there is a slight give in terms of the price in the springtime, but we're gaining it back during the summertime. So it's cheaper per unit of nitrogen during the summertime. But the advantage that we're getting from this across all aspects of it is that protected urea is still growing the grass. It's minimizing our greenhouse gas emissions. It's also minimizing our ammonia emissions, which is really important from an agriculture point of view, because we're the main culprits. We often talk about the impact of industry, etc., on greenhouse gas emissions, and that agriculture itself isn't fully to blame. And many people will have cited the example that during the lockdown, greenhouse gas emissions seem to be reduced because of less transport movement, etc., on the roads, and the same number of cows were still being milked and moving around the country. So that's fair enough, but from the point of view of ammonia emissions, we're 95% responsible in the agricultural industry. So the trailing shoe and protected urea can help us eat into this emissions factor that we have to deal with quite significantly, because it just completely minimizes the amount of ammonia emissions being produced. And then nitrate leaching, urea is recommended as the fertilizer of choice in the springtime, from the point of view that can is very mobile in the soil, so water can actually move the nitrate from can into water bodies very quickly, whereas urea gets locked in because of the charge, and protected urea obviously has the same advantage. So from that point of view, we'd be strongly advocating that people would try some protected urea this year. And as I said, just given the current conditions, if you haven't used it prior to now, just wait until maybe we might get back to a normal scenario where we can expect our 50-60 kilos of growth hopefully before switching, so that you don't get a negative feeling about the product on the basis of the performance of it in a drought scenario. So just one other thing to talk about, or actually I'll come back to, because Richie's at his point there now, so I'll go back to Richie there and just bring him back in.
Okay, we're back here with the heifers, and we're just going to talk about taking the heifers off the platform. I suppose the two things, I'll let David talk about how they've fed the heifers. Basically, the heifers have access to this field here, and getting silage only, and 2 kilos of soya hull. So two round bales and 2 kilos soya hull. Maybe talk about, David, how you're actually feeding this out. The two different ways you fed it out, and which way works better.
Yeah, that's it, Richie. So we're feeding the silage in the field similarly to the cows. So we tried it at the wire. As you can see there, they have a little bit left there, and today we've tried it same as the cows, just spread out at random, and they seem to be picking it up fairly well. So we're feeding the 2 kilos of soya hull then as well, just as to top up their requirement in the shed. So the heifers have heat detection collars on them, and they're within striking distance of the yard as well. So they're run in every morning to pick up any for AI, and they get their 2 kilos of hulls at that stage. So this paddock is destined for reseeding soon enough. So if the conditions do turn a little bit unfavourable and there's a little bit of harm done, we won't worry too much. But at the moment they're cleaning it up fairly well.
Okay, maybe comment on the milk yield, David.
Yeah, so back to the cows. The milk yield, the cows have held their yield fairly well at 3.59 protein and 4.14 fat, and just 2.3 kilos of solids there for the last 2 days. So they're milking fairly well, and that.
Okay, and the EBI of the herd. Sorry, the EBI of the herd, David. You have I think Tom made a comment to me the last day. He said there's been no bulls in this farm since 1996. So all AI has been used here in that period.
That's right, Richie. It's all AI, and we're focusing on EBI. The EBI at the moment now is 168 for the herd, and sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's 168 for the herd, and what we've just done recently now is we've tagged the heifers with the genotypes. We're going to genotype all the heifers and try and improve the EBI further by selecting the heifers that we use for breeding.
Okay, and you've used the colours successfully.
Yes, we've had the colours on the heifers heifers and cows for the last 3 years now, I think. So we pretty much solely depend on them for heat detection, along with a little bit of observation. But we find them very good in terms of they seem to pick up the cows very well. And with the heifers, the fact that they're away from the yard a little bit at the moment, we just run them down in the mornings, and the colours pick up anything that's in heat. So we're finding them very good.
And did you, when you were adapting to the colours, Tom, did you continue to use tail paint, or at what stage did you trust the colour enough?
We kind of more or less trusted them from the beginning, but we would have been using a fair bit of observation, Stuart. But you know, once you get in on the colours, you have to obviously get used to looking at the graphs, and they're pretty straightforward. We find they have worked very well. We had, I think, over 90% of the cows AI in the first 3 weeks, and we had all but 2 heifers AI in the first 3 weeks. So we're very happy with it now.
Okay, very good. So I suppose, Richie, just to put it in context when you're talking about the EBI there, I have the lads' figures here, which and the herd is in the top 5% at a herd EBI of €166, and delivering on the ground.
Yeah, so it's delivering on the ground. If you look at a 6-week calving rate, it's 89% is the 6-week calving rate for the farm here. You know, and 520 kilograms of milk solids supplied last year. So it's actually, and there's still a lot of heifers in the herd. So the potential, you know, maturity, the 6-week calving rate is okay. It's a black and white herd, and AI, I think the big thing here has been AI, high EBI, but AI been used here since 1996, as Tom said. So as part of one of the, if you look at the sustainability measures that's been talked about, high EBI, you know, fertile animals requiring less heifers, so it'll be less stock on the ground. So from a greenhouse gas emissions, the whole EBI side is massive. So they're probably achieving that to a large degree on the farm, but they feel there's a lot more they can achieve on the farm, that the solids here can, 550 would be the target here supplied on the farm here, and with maturity in that, they will easily get there.
Okay, so there's a question from Alan Poole in Wexford there then about the replacement rate. Are you currently building the building numbers, or are you static in terms of your herd situation?
Well, up to this year, we've been building numbers just from our own heifers that we've been able to breed. So about probably 25% of the herd at the moment are heifers this year. From now on, our herd becomes more or less static. So we're hoping to bring that down to about 18%. Probably over the next couple of years. We'll probably still have some older cows that we want to kind of pull out of the herd as next couple of years. But a reduced number of replacements, then we're hoping to build up the production as it matures.
Very good. Okay, so just to point out what the lads were saying there, hopefully you can see this now. The herd EBI is €166, and as I said, that's putting the Fennelly herd in the top 5% of herds in the country. You can see that they have a focus on a sub-index for milk of €49 and a fertility sub-index of €74. And George is there on the farm as well, helping Richie this morning, and George's figure is €85 for the target for fertility for an animal to calve in 365 days, basically. So they're heading well on that way with their herd, and Richie said I think it was 86 or 89% 6-week calving rate. And you can see that in the young stock that are coming through, then that the 2019 calves that are being bred there, the heifers that the lads are in the field with at the moment, have a fertility sub-index of €78, and the young stock that were born this month or this spring are at €99. So just to show that the emphasis is there, you can see that we'll say herd DBI of 166. Their fifth lactation animals are quite good at the 161. The animals being bred this year at 182, good solid EBI, and the calves born this year at 210. Further progress constantly being made, and a nice improvement in their milk sub-index in the last cohort of stock coming in, from the first lactation at 55 to the heifers that will be coming in next year at 62, moving up to 68 then hopefully for the animals coming in 2022. So as Richie said, and Tom has said there as well, the focus is to improve the age profile of the herd now, because they've reached their numbers that they plan to milk, and that they hope to carry, with the less replacements potentially, because they won't need them, because they should have a more fertile herd by virtue of their emphasis on fertility in their EBI. Now, George, you're unmuted there at the moment. Are you looking to come in there, or?
Yeah, come in. Can I come in for a second there, Stuart?
Can, George,
you hear me?
of course, yeah.
Okay, so if we look at the maintenance sub-index of this group of animals here, the heifers, they're at around 10 or 11 euro. That means that as mature cows are going to mature to about 600 kilos live weight as third calvers in mid-lactation. Just looking at the heifers here this morning, they're in excellent condition, and they're weighing, I would estimate their weight to be close to 400 kilos at this stage. So they have another 140 kilos to grow between now and calving, because we target pre-calving weight that's 90% of their mature weight, and that's about 540 kgs of a pre-calving weight. So they have 140 kilos to do in 240 days or thereabouts. So that, you know, there's a bit of there's a fairly substantial requirement to keep the push on with these heifers, and that's part of the reason why Tom and David are supplementing fairly hard at the moment with the soil hulls and the silage out in the paddock here.
Very good. So just a question as well, George, you can put it to them there maybe as you're moving. Is there a plan to sell surplus heifers, or are they going to maybe replace some of the older cows within the herd over the next year or two and then settle down?
We'll ask that question to Tom when we go down there. Now, I asked him it earlier, and I think he said that he'll need most of the animals he has this year to fill to make up the herd to its full complement for next year. But there might be a few for sale, not too many. We'll ask Tom that now in a minute, okay?
Yes, George, I heard that question there. That's it. The heifers that we have, we'll probably keep this year, and we'll probably take out some of the older cows and maybe some of the lower production cows. We have extra calves kept now, and with the genotyping, we're hoping to be able to sort out the ones that we want to keep out of those for next year. So we'll probably sell the others probably in the spring as breeding heifers. That's the plan at the moment, anyway.
Okay, so I suppose we're coming up against the time a small bit there, so Richie. So I'll come back to you again now to our final stop there at the reseed.
Yeah, I'm at the reseed here and get the lads to talk about it. But I suppose the one thing about the reseed, you see, it's the one field struck me and in 18 when the drought struck that once the grass seeds seemed to get a hold, they seemed the roots were fairly well up to the top, that they stayed fairly green. So wherever the moisture is coming, they seem to be getting it. I was here 2 weeks ago and these grass seeds were struggling a bit, but they seem to have in the last 2 weeks, a small bit of rain they've got, they seem to have changed inside out. That's a big question. The lads went to sow grass seeds earlier this year to try and avoid some of the dry weather, but it didn't work in their favour. So I'll maybe get the lads to comment on when it was sown and when the grass seeds were sown and what treatment they got since.
Yeah, so the grass seeds were sown on the 16th of April, Richie. They're sown just with power harrow and air seeder mounted on that. So they were sown in what we thought were ideal conditions, but the conditions afterwards then weren't so ideal. So they were slow to get going, and we gave them the post-emergent spray then on the 29th of May, and that has got a fairly good kill on the weeds. and they've improved with the little drops of rain that we have got. So they're slightly stripy, as you can see, and as always, behind the wheels of the tractor seems to be where the ground is more compact and the moisture is a bit better. Is where the grass seeds are strongest. So, but overall across the field, they're very close to grazing now. So probably next week we'll bring the heifers out from where they are and give them a fresh bite, and we'll get them grazed fairly quick. So, hopefully with the bit of rain then that we get in the forecast, they'll come on all right.
Yeah, very good. I suppose, do you want to make any comment on was it difficult to make the decision about spraying it, David, given that it was probably under a bit of stress?
Yeah, sure, it probably was, Stuart, but I'd say we're glad we sprayed it, to be honest. The weeds were getting strong as well, so it probably was the right thing to do, I'd say, at the time, all right. But look, that could be a factor if the grass seeds were very weak, I suppose.
Yeah, and are you happy
just
with
coming in on that there, Stuart?
Yes, Tom.
The one thing, the weeds were getting a bit strong, and we felt we'd have to go and spray it. The one thing we had to use spray that wasn't clover safe, so it knocked the clover out of it. We'll probably go back in and maybe sow clover in again afterwards. But there were seedling docks coming in it, and there was some chickweed, and we felt, you know, on balance, it was better to go and spray at that stage, you know.
Yeah, look, I think it was prudent to do that from the point of view, as you said there, I suppose you have to take the hit in the clover. We were only talking about it amongst ourselves there recently as well, like, so the trade-off is, do you kill your clover and control the weed content of your new lay and come back in with the clover, like you're saying, in due course, which obviously, just to point out to people, it could be up to 2 or 3 months depending on the product that you used before you can come back in with the clover, and it might even have to run into next year before you come back in with the clover. But the control, like what you did, is definitely the right thing in terms of controlling the weed infestation in a new lay early on. It's going to mean less chemical requirement and give your clover a better chance into the future when you do use it. So that was the.
Well, I spoke to Alan G from Convia there. He'd be my business manager. He came out and had a look at it, and he felt that, you know, on balance, that was the best thing to do.
Yeah, definitely, it's great advice. Okay, so Richie, do you want to show the hedge?
Yeah, so listen, we're okay. Production and efficiency across the farm are probably two of the main greenhouse gas emissions lowering effect here. But if I look at the other elements of the program, we're measuring energy, water usage, protecting water quality across the farm. I'm just going to cover here usage, biodiversity, and they're encouraging measuring water usage, trying to trees go up. That's part of the practice and part of the new farm program. But they planted a new hedge here, part of the farm program. They planted a new hedge here, and maybe Tom might comment on that. The level of biodiversity, we're measuring that. We're getting a baseline data across all the farms. On the farm here, it's around 5%, and we hope to get that over 7% in the next number of years. So it might be planting more hedges, it might be corners of fields. It'll be bringing, and one of their plans is to bring, they have a water course, is to bring the fence out 5 foot from there. So this farm was originally in reps. There's a hedge up there that Tom might talk about as well that was in reps that he planted years ago in the rep scheme. And I see some talk about a new rep scheme coming out, and Tom might be happy with that to get that going. So maybe Tom might comment on the level of biodiversity and the new hedgerow here on the farm.
Sure, Richie. It's something that we really hadn't looked at before, but with Aoife Leader there, who's involved with the project, she mapped the farm and marked in any hedges, areas that were regarded as habitats, and that gave us our roughly just under 5% of an area of biodiversity. So with that in mind, it's one of the reasons why we planted this hedge here, and it's one of a number of hedges that we planted over the last few years. Throughout the day now, we'll probably show a few pictures of them, but they take a little while to establish, but they really do add to the farm, and if both shelter for the stock and of course an area for the wildlife to thrive. This particular hedge was sown in the beginning of February, and it's mainly whitethorn with a mix of, you know, some other native plants like spindle, holly, gilderose, and you know, the drought didn't help. We've had to water it a few times, but we're hoping that it'll establish now, and you know, it should provide a nice bit of shelter in these fields here.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
So we're kind of running up against time, Rich. So I suppose we'll have to.
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up. Thank the lads for taking this on today. The webinar is part of the overall virtual farm walk. I hope people got something from it. We tried to cover the overall program, what we're trying to achieve in the overall program, and what's currently happening on the farm. You can see the drought scenario, how they're handling it, and it's basically just they have to go feed hard. The overall program, I suppose, we'll be covering during the day is productivity and efficiency, the whole area of the environment, and I suppose the welfare of the farmer and welfare of the animals. I suppose the big thing this year we're concentrating on as well is selective dry cow treatment for the back end. They would have tried it during the day. We'll talk about that with Yoris. Summers the vet with Glambia, and we'll talk about that. They tried it last winter and they're going to try more of it this winter. Selective dry cow treatment. It's going to be part of the rules next year anyway, so we have to go with that. That's it. I'd like to thank the lads for taking this on. Thanks to Glambia, our partners in this, and the Teagasc Glambia Future Farm Programme. And lads, follow us during the day. There's going to be loads of information.
Yeah,
Thanks
so
very much, Richie, and thanks, Stuart.
yeah, I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to the Fennellys in particular for engaging with Richie to do this, because it's daunting enough taking a farm walk on the farm, not to mind to have to try to do it over in an online format. So very willing and very easy to work with there in the last couple of weeks in terms of the preparation. So I strongly encourage people that are on Instagram and Twitter to engage with David and Richie and Tom over the course of the day and get some good feedback from it. So thank you very much. And just to remind people that we're back again next week. And next week we'll be talking to Tyke Buckley from AIB, just to give a rundown on the financial situation currently in dairy markets and how that's going to affect at farm level and so forth. So we hope to see you then next week. And thanks again, lads, and all the best for the rest of the day.